afternoon, all, and welcome to another edition of the Sal Greco Show. Thanks for tuning in. It's a little somber day, obviously, because some crazy stuff happened last night. So, thank you all for tuning in for this show. There's going to be a lot to talk about. If you can, before we start, if you're on YouTube, please hit that like, share, subscribe button, hit the notification button as well. And also, if you're on Rumble, hit the Rumble button, share it out. And if you're watching us on X, you could also share this out by hitting the repost button and sharing the links across numerous platforms or to your friends. So the reason it's kind of somber is last night you had a wicked, sick, anti-Semitic attack. Okay. Two people that worked in the U.S. Embassy, the Israeli U.S. Embassy in D.C., Yaron Lashinsky and Sarah Milgram, were gunned down by this guy, Elias Rodriguez, who is a Chicago native. He's a radical from this Free Palestine movement. It's basically code word for abolish Israel and then abolish the rest of the world, and executed them and just stood there and wanted to be captured because this is what this individual wanted. Obviously, he's not Arabic. He's not a native of Gaza or anything like that. So you have, once again, another person that is trying to, well, there's I'd say a large portion of these people, individuals that are involved in this movement are not directly affected by anything. They're just radicals. And this individual had ties to left-wing groups that are radical left-wing groups that are tied, that spearheaded the original a couple of years ago, Black Lives Matter, we'll call them riots. So, like I said, when all of this originally started, when you see people with pink and purple hair wearing keffiyehs and acting like they're Arabic, that's just, they've completely hijacked that entire movement. That movement has now become majority radicals. And why? Look at what you have here. This kind of stuff needs to stop. And it's, it's good at our guest today, who's the mayor of Slippery Rock, Pennsylvania, Butler County, J.D. Longo. He actually was at the attempted assassination attempt of President Trump in Butler County. So he could actually, we're going to be discussing that event. And also now looks that events like this occur. This guy should have the book thrown at him. He's an animal. Anyone that tries to glorify this, you're part of the problem. I don't care how you feel about things. There's no room for political violence. I mean, look at this. There's this guy. Look at the signs. He's always at these. He's completely engulfed and entrenched in this garbage. There's no room in this country for this. I'm sorry. And, I understand, First Amendment and all that stuff, and I'm all for it. But when I was a cop, I would always look around and I was always worried about the one-off, the radical. Somewhere in the crowd, it has to exist. So out of this, what happens now? In New York City, the NYPD's bolstered their patrol. They're going to have police all over, the House of Worships, all the institutionals, all the cultural institutions, because you never know. Because now, after this, if you haven't heard, in Langley, Virginia today at the CIA headquarters, some maniac tried to ram into the entrance to that, and he got killed for it. There's very little reporting on that, but it did happen. So we are seeing a series of events, and I just don't want to alarm people, but these are the kind of events that you saw leading up to September 11th. I see this here. This is the FBI agents, I believe, heading to Elias Rodriguez's home in Chicago, where they found, I believe, manifesto and all kinds of things regarding this guy's ties to these radical groups or whatever these guys are planning. But the reason what makes this country great is, you're free to do what you want, free expression, because, other countries like the ones, well, there is no real Palestine. It's just a little strip of Gaza. But those countries out there, Middle East, there's places in Africa where you saw President Trump and the South African president talking, and there's nothing but chaos there where you don't have freedoms. You got to be very careful because you could get, killed in 2 seconds. Yeah, Elias Rodriguez from the Party for Socialism and Liberation argued that the murder of Laquan McDonald and the Chicago bid for an Amazon headquarters are not 2 separate issues, but rather they are both connected. The wealth that Amazon has brought to Seattle has not been shared with its black residents, Rodriguez said. Amazon's whitening of Seattle is structurally racist and a direct danger to all workers who live in that city. This guy, look, see, this is what he wrote. Like I said, this is a brainwashed human being. I've always said, entrenched in these movements, you will see brainwashed individuals. So, again, like, this needs to stop. This is real political violence, unlike January 6th. And you know who's really to blame here? Mainstream media, the Jake Tappers of the world, the Joe Scarboroughs of the world. You glorify these idiots while putting people down that were what? Walking around on the lawn one day? Those were the greatest the worst domestic terrorists of all time. Meanwhile, the real domestic terrorists are voting in your block and standing behind you, listening to you idiots. So that's the problem we have in this country. This platform, what we do here, we're about free speech, but we're trying to educate people. Many are low information, some like this individual, and we need to avoid this. You need to be informed. Look, people should stay alert, and I'm not saying look over your shoulders or be aware of your surroundings, because it seems that there's an underbelly tone here. The tone and the underbelly of this is it's around. So just know, and you shouldn't have to live in fear if you're Jewish in this country. I mean, I thought we already lived through this many years ago. Apparently, the people that say they're anti-fascist and all this other nonsense are the ones that are bringing it here. You're bringing that here, but your ideology, okay? And there's no room for this in this country. So this individual should be made a prime example of. He should never see the light of day again. We should see his manifesto. We should see everything, whoever he's involved with, grab everyone, stop this little network. This goes back many, many years. And I wish everyone would just stop, because this is the kind of stuff that happened prior to 9/11, which is just a few months away. We'll be celebrating the 24th anniversary of that. So let's not forget about that. That was the biggest domestic terrorist incident in the history of the United States. So my heart goes out to the victims. I would stay vigilant, but I would still be prideful of who you are and what you are, because that's the way this country is. You shouldn't be worried about who you are and what you do and whether you can walk the streets without being killed by some psychopath because they believe in some radical movement. That is all, let me be honest with you folks, it's all BS. That was the line we used in the police department. So I actually want to get to some other news before I bring on Mayor JD. So in New York City, we had the prior mayor, this dope Bill de Blasio. He had sued City Hall and lost, but it actually is costing the taxpayer. So this is from the city. It's from Greg B. Smith, the Dean of Journalism. So the former mayor apologized to New Yorkers and agreed to pay for his past NYPD protection on the presidential campaign. I don't know if you remember, he ran for president. That was another disaster. But taxpayers still pay to defend a meritless lawsuit he filed to avoid paying for the police detail. which is it's unbelievable. He agreed to pay for $330,000 for his misuse of an NYPD detail during his 2019 campaign. But so they looked through from a Freedom of Information request. The law department paid out more than $284,000 to an outside firm to defend the city against de Blasio's lawsuit, including a short-lived appeal after the case was tossed by a lower court. So the taxpayers are actually funding all this nonsense. And this came from him fighting the conflict of interest board that found him guilty. He was using the NYPD as a security detail for 31 events. The conflict of interest board actually fined him, which was the first time ever a mayor was fined by the conflict of interest board. He had to pay $155,000 fine plus the $319,000 or $355,000 he agreed to, and he immediately sued. So when he sued and all these appeals are going on, the taxpayers were on the hook, which is unbelievable. He appealed this $319,000 fine, and it was in restitution plus a $10,000 fine, right? That's another thing you had to pay. All of this stuff to fight that cost the taxpayers $284,000 in New York City. This is like the most bureaucratic place in all of the world and the way it's run. So I don't know what to say other than what else can you expect? The stupidest, dumbest mayor in the history of New York City there, Bill de Blasio, the worst ever, one of the worst. I mean, you could say the guy that's there might be pretty bad. And yeah, Annette says in the chat, where's all the millions he and his wife stole? Yeah, on top. Well, he was stealing money and the taxpayers were representing him in his lawsuits. How about that one? That's unbelievable. But now we have another individual that's running for comptroller, and he's a current city councilman, and that's Justin Brennan. Now, Justin Brennan's one of the, I'd say, most charismatic members of city council because he's a former, I'd say, radio personality. He used to work for the Opie and Anthony show many years ago, but he's anything but truthful. So this is his campaign ad for comptroller. So let's show the public his wonderful ad.
New Yorkers are tired of being taken for a ride. Cost of living up, quality of life down. I want to fix that. I'm Justin Brannon, the Democrat for control. I grew up in Brooklyn, working class. My mom's a teacher. As budget boss, I stood up to Eric Adams. I said, hell no, to his school cuts. Now I'm ready to take on Trump and his crew of freaks. I'll stop the politician games, protect our city, and focus on the people. That's why labor unions and local groups are with us. Brannon, the Democrat for control.
Paid for by Justin Brannon.
He'll fight everyone. Listen, this guy has been in city council for 8 years. Bay Ridge was, if you go there, before he was a councilman, it was very clean. It was nice to be in. There's a park, I believe it's on 4th Avenue and 93rd or 4th Street. This little park that was in between where there's a pizzeria across the street. It's like a little square. It was actually closed for many years and unkempt. That's this guy's responsibility. He's actually part of the problem. And there he is saying how he's going to fix everything. He'd have to fix himself. He has to actually go away. And then, of course, Coney Island, which he brings in, and here, new pro-Brennan IE has ties to Coney Island casino proposal, former GOP candidate, Thor Equities. This guy is in Coney Island, a place I know well. I worked there for 8 years, talking about, I'm a son of Brooklyn, all this nonsense. He doesn't represent Coney Island, by the way. And then what's bringing Trump up? What is the Trump thing with all these people? He is not the mayor, but by the way, he does agree with. He says, he was endorsing the same candidates. He was buddying up to Eric Adams, who now he acts like, I'm not his friend. I don't know him. This is like the oldest trick in a book. Folks, I don't know who they're going to vote for in New York City for comptroller. I clearly wouldn't vote for him or Brad Lander, who's even worse. But, you got to make a decision. You got to do a little soul searching. I would vote for, if you don't like the Republican, whoever it is running, Ronald McDonald is a good choice. A lot better than Justin Brennan or Brad Lander. And, seeing something like that just tells me, he's pandering to the anti-Trump movement. And also, he didn't mind the Free Palestine movement either, running around in Bay Ridge when they were running up and down the streets for a while down Fifth Avenue, and it was an issue, and cops were brawling with people in the street. Another time, they had to basically subvert two groups from converging in Fifth Avenue. So the NYPD smartly actually got these people to move away from that event that was going on in this little get-together. Is the committee, New Yorkers for Accountability, is listed as being run by Patricia Lynch, who is one of several powerful lobbyists working on Thor Equity's $3 billion casino bid on Coney Island, dubbed the Coney. Lynch could not be immediately reached for comment. Brennan's campaign declined to comment. Of course, he's highly conflicted. So if you vote for him, you're voting for one of the most conflicted individuals who could possibly be comptroller. So there's the Justin Brennan ad, who I find bizarre and actually a little funny that he says he's going to get all the corruption out. He's there 8 years. He's part of the problem. Next up was this thing that came up about the unfit cops that are in the police academy. Inspector lets recruits who failed psychological exam join the NYPD. Terrell Anderson, the former head of a unit charged with assessing candidates, had been transferred. He has been praised as an innovative officer. Yeah, I know. Just like Martin Matarazzo, they're great people. Great people. So that means when you hear the word great people, you just close a blind eye to anything you see that might be corrupt or wrong. And anyone else that's been persecuted, no. Well, I don't know if they're great people. We need to look into them. But not if they're great. When Joe Kopp says they're great, that's when Joe Kopp says, no, whatever they do, well, they let me go home early and not say anything about it. So they're good people. So Terrell Anderson, basically, that whole article is something you heard right here on the Finest Unfiltered Network. You heard it right here on the Finest Unfiltered podcast when you heard John McCarry and Eric Dim talking about this stuff long before any of this became public. Chris Monahan, this is from that article. Chris Monahan, the president of the Captains Endowment Association, the union representing Inspector Anderson, said the inspector was always open and above board about overriding psychological reports he did not agree with. He's not wrong here, Captain Monahan said. Yeah, of course not. He's a great guy. Joe Kopp said so. So Joe Kopp, who, the quintessential Joe Kopp, you could picture that. They know it all. Everything is good. No, everything is wrong. Okay, that means they're very unfit cops. When you see I don't know, didn't we just see someone recently get convicted of being a child predator on the job? Yeah. That guy right there okays people like that to get on the job. That's the kind of guy who lets everything float, but don't talk bad about him. Joe Kopp said he's a great guy because Joe Kopp goes home early and he doesn't say anything about it, or else whatever else they're doing. So we need to praise him if you're Joe Kopp, and then he's a great guy. But if you refuse to go along with a mandate and get terminated like Marlon Bethel over nothing, Joe Kopp is not standing there with you. So, because we gotta praise a guy like this because he lets you go home early. That's the mentality of many on the job, or old timers, or some of that class, and that's why NYPD leadership is a complete failure and a mess in New York City. So that's all I got to say about that stuff. Yeah, here he is, Frankie Pagliucci. Thanks, handing over $9.99 to the show. Thanks a lot for that, and the network. He says, random drug test. There you go. You know all about that. There's a whole lawsuit with that, okay? And Frank's involved in that about their random dole test. Another issue they have with, by the way, the actual dole tests are not even, they can't even certify them. They can't even tell you that the test is 100% accurate, which means it's not accurate. And they know this. The job's been doing this for 20 years, NYPD. And their own company they use actually stated that the actual test they're using, when they say test for cause, is not accurate. they actually released this statement to their own board and their shareholders. But the NYPD to this day, right now, test them for cause. That's saying I want to drum this guy out or this girl out of the police department. So just so you know what's going on here. But hey, Joe Kopp said, Inspector so-and-so, great. Martine Matarazzo is great. She's actually being honored. So they're going to cover up the fact. I don't know if Jimmy Rodriguez is going to this event with her or partying with her. That criminal, self-admitted criminal mob associate, maybe he's going to this event that she's being honored at, apparently. But hey, Joe Kopp said that everything's great. They're great people. Great people. You hear that a lot around here. But enough of all of that. Enough of that ranting. My guest today is actually someone who was in Butler County. He was there when this entire incident occurred with President Trump, when they were trying to assassinate him. I don't know if we want to play. I'm going to show you something, at least a clip of him when he was out there, because he was there and he was all over the place. And he's a combat Marine veteran, and also he's actually the mayor of Slippery Rock in Pennsylvania, which is in Butler County. So he's a paisan. He's a good man. And I want to bring him on because he's our guest today, because he's got a lot to say about, things that are occurring right now in the Trump administration as well. And there's JD Longo, my fellow paisan. How are you, JD?
Sal, ciao. Thanks for having me on, sir. It's a pleasure to be here with you today.
Yeah, it's an honor to have you on. And just so you see, people, there he is with the president. So he's also a Trump elector. So he did a lot, on the ground to get Trump over the finish line. So I actually want to start because you saw a little bit of what happened in D.C. And again, it's political violence. And again, we just witnessed this not once but twice with President Trump. And now you were there for the the incident in Butler. But what do you have to say? What are your thoughts on what just occurred in D.C. and how you have radicals running around and think this political violence is a good thing?
Oh, Sal, where do we begin? First of all, it's a very sad situation, of course, and anybody who has a shred of decency should be thinking about those two individuals and their families today and the life that was stolen from them. I understand that they were engaged to be wed, and I think that they were due to be married in a week or two from now in Jerusalem, of all places, a beautiful place that people from all of the Abrahamic faiths, including Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, hold dear to their heart, and that was stolen from them. And what we see in their story is a story that's not unlike the story of many. These are two human beings who were just enjoying a night out, as it seemed, whose lives were stolen from them because of a disgusting, radical, and poisonous ideology that has permeated throughout a lot of American society, throughout a lot of the global community as well. And unfortunately, as you see with this he's not even an individual, he's an animal, as you said, Sal. This is somebody who was poisoned by liberal academia, the socialist and communist New World Order agenda professors who are taking and preying on impressionable young people like this guy, obviously, this guy Rodriguez, who has been led to believe, like so many other liberals on the far left, that it is not just the right thing, but it's their duty to make sure that they are resisting. And unfortunately for us, a lot of that piece of resistance for these leftists, for these radicals, for these animals is to include violence. And as you said, Sal, so eloquently, I don't care where you're at on the spectrum, in no way, shape, or form should political violence be ever tolerated. The only violence that should be done is to people like Rodriguez, who did violence toward these people. And I hope that he sees justice. Like you said, Sal, the book needs to be thrown at him. We need to use this guy as an example. We got to make an example out of him, make sure that people understand this will not be tolerated. And I'm certain that the Trump administration is going to make sure that people like this are held to task for what they did.
Yeah, and also I believe it's the prior 4 years of and here you are at Butler County, and this was another incident that occurred that is just like what we're seeing today. And I think the last 4 years of the prior presidency is the lead up to what you saw, whether it was in Butler County, what we're seeing today, what you also saw in West Palm Beach. And it's just this political violence, and there was a wink and a nod, in my opinion, coming from that administration that did nothing and held no one accountable. And now you're seeing it spill into what we just saw last night. And also, JD tried to ram into the CIA headquarters today. Some maniac that he's dead now. Why? I don't know. What is that about? That's what you're saying. There's not even a left wing. It's some kind of radical like ideology. They're just there that they want to see it all burn down. They want to bring chaos, kind of like the Joker and the Batman movie in the Dark Knight Rises. That's what you kind of see. They just want to watch the world burn. I mean, look right here. This is it. The woman who crashed into a gate at CIA quarters has been preliminary identified as a 27-year-old Monia Spadaro, according to 2 senior law enforcement officials briefed on the incident. I mean, what could that be about, JD?
You know, I said a couple weeks ago, Sal, when I was talking with some friends about this, and the only way that I could put it was that there seems to be this epidemic amongst the left side of the aisle, you know, and I hate to say it, but it's true. You know, the Democrat Party has allowed for these folks to have a voice in their midst, and they have, bent over backwards to accommodate these people to make them believe that their way of thinking and their worldview isn't just going to be tolerated, but that it should be part of the mainstream platform of the leftist, agenda. And so I don't know what that particular individual's motive was, but I can guarantee you one thing. She is suffering from this epidemic that allows for people on the left to flirt with violence, Trump derangement syndrome, all of the things that go into that. And it's likely as a 27-year-old, she's the product, she's somebody who's been touched by liberal progressive academics who have poisoned her mind with things that have made her think that she's doing something noble somehow. It's likely, I don't like to speculate, but I mean, time and again, we see people that like to do things like this because they think somehow that they're taking a swipe at President Trump and his administration or at Republicans in general. And this is their stand that they're going to make. Again, their act of resistance we hear over and over again from these folks. And so, all I can say, Sal, is that it's clear that there's a lot of people in the United States that need some serious mental help.
Yeah. And I wouldn't even identify them as Democrats. I think they just radically, you have a group of people out there and they vote also, but they're radicals where they want to radically change not just their town, the county, the state, the country. They want to change the world, and they will have a radical view. But it's not a majority, but they're a minority, but they're willing to go the whole 9 yards, which is use violence in order to justify their means. That's the scary part here. And here's what's her name saying, JD, welcome. So glad you're here. I'm not done. I'm done a lot of doors, knocked on a lot of doors in Bucks County with the NYYRC, which is the New York Young Republicans. We're actually there the same day that president was with Elon Musk on his revisit to Butler. So you do have somebody that's in the chat for you.
Well, let me say, Sal, real quick, what's her name? Thank you so much for all that you're doing. It's the grassroots individuals like you who are making sure that, our area, Pennsylvania, New York, is not going to fall by the wayside. Thank you so much for coming across the border to help us here in the Keystone State. We really appreciate all that you do.
Yeah. As Hunter says, as most cops learn, the administration is liberal progressives who are in charge of enforcing policies. It's true. But I just want to put this back up, this graphic. This is more of what just happened in Langley. The officials are investigating whether Spadaro was intoxicated during the incident on CIA property in Langley, Virginia. She is being treated for the gunshot wounds, the officials said, NBC reported. Spadaro was found guilty in 2021 on a charge of driving while intoxicated. Filings in Arlington General District Court show. Her sentence of 180 days in jail was suspended, according to the court filings. This is interesting. You always hear this. There was an incident a couple of years ago. There's a few at the Capitol people trying to go in, and they were stopped by Capitol police, like they were trying to drive their car in, which is stupid. But she's drunk, she's intoxicated, which was actually what I specialized in, arresting people for being intoxicated behind the wheel. So now they're going to say that. I just find it bizarre that 2 incidents happened in a short amount of time, not too far from each other, Langley and DC, and it just has that markings of people now are on high alert again, kind of like what 9/11 felt like. You remember how that felt like. So I don't know what to say with this CIA thing. This thing is, I think it's a side it's like a side note to what happened last night.
It's and again, I hate to speculate, but Sal, I'm sure that you agree with me when I say this. Sometimes things line up just a little bit too perfectly, and it goes beyond just coincidence. To me, when I see that the CIA building was involved in this, or the CIA in general, that seems like a very deliberate thing, right? It's not like I can just think that there's somebody who's intoxicated who fell asleep at the wheel and just so happened to barge into the CIA, right? And so, again, not to speculate, but it's clear to me again, that there are a lot of folks suffering, and I do just want to say again, and I agree with you. I don't want to hold the entirety of the Democrat Party to task here and say that they're all like this, but I do think that this kind of behavior. And then to take it a step further, the lack of accountability of folks, right? So whenever you see folks who make these kinds of do these kinds of things, right, and then they're facing a judge who's going to be very easy on them, they feel emboldened, they feel comfortable to do these things again. Now, I don't know if that was her first offense, and maybe that's the reason why the judge suspended her sentence. But I would hope that somebody in the law enforcement community, and then furthermore, a judge would say, you know what, hey, you need to get your life together, and so we're going to try to help you get on track by making you understand that there are consequences to your actions, and that's really what it comes down to, Sal. You probably grew up a lot like I did. We had shame in my house, right? I was fearful that if I ever did anything outside of the house, not only was I going to hear it from my teachers, I was going to hear it from my neighbors on the way home, the parents of my friends, and then I was really going to get it at home, right? And so you knew when you left the house not to embarrass your family and do these kinds of things. We don't have any shame, and we have no accountability anymore, Sal.
Yeah. We're both first generation families here. You and I, we're both first generation born. So we have those installed values of the motherland, where things are a little different than they are here, where you respect people around you, you respect your family, you have a lot of manners. You better have manners, because you were held accountable for things. I remember that growing up, even in Bensonhurst, everybody was held accountable for whatever their actions are, whatever they said, whatever they did. Now there's no accountability, just like we're seeing here. Apparently this person's drunk. I don't know. We're not speculating. I just find it, I don't want to speculate anymore, but I find it very odd. Somebody's just going to drive their car in. I don't care if they're drunk. I mean, you got to be kidding me. Who's driving drunk too at that time in the morning? I mean, that's another thing. But what I wanted really you to talk about was Butler County and the entire thing that happened there. What if you could retrace your steps? Because you still don't know anything. We know Thomas Matthew Crooks of Bethel Park, Pennsylvania. He's the lone shooter. That's it. Don't ask any questions. It's over. It's past tense. But yet, I believe the president still has threats to his life, and they still have to have him at the highest alert as far as security goes wherever he goes. So what can you tell us about that incident in Butler County, what you experienced, the aftermath? Because I don't know what they're doing now about anything, because it seems to me in this country, you still have political violence all over the place.
Yeah, gosh, I mean, to retrace my steps back to that day, I think it would, I can say that it was, at least at first, it seemed like any other Trump rally day, right? It was filled with excitement. The air was electrified. People were happy. And any of you who have been to a Trump rally, you'll know what I'm talking about when you go there. It's like you're there with your family. It's a big family reunion. And some have even said that it's almost like a religious experience, in that there's a spirituality to it. We're all there with a common goal and cause, and we have this mission to support the America First agenda. And that's how it started. It reminded me and many of us in Butler County of what the president's visit to Butler County in 2020 on Halloween night looked like. I also had the honor of opening that rally as well. And so we were all looking forward to an encore of that, Sal. We wanted to experience that again, and never as much as in that moment were we prepared to march on to victory behind President Trump and take this country back. So everything was just great. Now, the thing that stands out to me, the things that do stand out to me, was, first of all, it was nearly 100 degrees there. And the humidity factor, of course, made it even worse. So everybody was very excited to begin with, but this general malaise took over pretty quickly, where the heat was just exhausting. There was no amount of shade or water that you could have to feel get your energy back. And so, even more so, everybody is now waiting for the president to take the stage so that he can re-energize and rejuvenate that crowd. I was blessed to open the rally that day and to say a few words. And then it's always my greatest honor to lead the rally goers in our Pledge of Allegiance to our flag and to our republic. And I got to do that. Shortly thereafter, my wife and I went backstage where we got to spend some time with the president. He asked me, hey, Mayor, how's it going on the ground here? What can you tell me about what we're looking like in Butler County? We had a short conversation about that, and I told him, Mr. President, we're working very hard for you here, and we're going to deliver Pennsylvania for you, sir. And so everything left off, on a positive note. My wife and I went back to our seats. And if you can imagine this, imagine that we are seated to the right of the president as he's standing at his podium. So if you were the president looking over your right shoulder, you would see us sitting to your immediate right. I'm sitting there with a lot of other participants in the rally, other members of government who are elected. And immediately to our 6 o'clock, about 15 feet, is Corey Compertour, our hero fire chief, whose life was stolen from us that day by this maniac, sitting there with his family in the bleachers directly behind us. And then if you go about another 100 yards behind them, you have the infamous rooftop, the one that we were told had a slope that was too steep, of course, for anybody to safely traverse. That served as the perch for this shooter, this maniac, to do what he did. And I remember when the president had taken a look over his right shoulder and he was about to refer to that famous graphic. He was about to point out the low border crossings that occurred under his administration and the huge uptick that ensued shortly after, the Biden-Harris regime took over. And it was at that moment that I heard the pop. What was really strange to me, Sal, and I'm a Marine. I spent time in Afghanistan. I'm an infantry rifleman. Nearly my whole life, I've used weapons and guns. Whether it was in my performance of my duties or as an enthusiast and a staunch believer in our Second Amendment right. So I heard that, and truth be told, Sal, my ear registered that because it's muscle memory for us. But my brain really would not allow me to believe that that was even a possibility. And this might make you chuckle, but I recalled at that moment a time when Ronald Reagan, after he was nearly assassinated, was giving a speech, and there was a balloon pop, and he looked up from his speech and he said, "Missed me," and he went back to his speech, and the crowd, erupted into applause. That played in my head in that moment. I said, "There's absolutely no way that that was around." Shortly after, of course, even more of those rounds started to come in. And Sal, you might have experienced this in the line of duty. When there are rounds that are fired in your vicinity and going overhead, they change the atmosphere. They steal the air from around you. It's a very distinct feeling. You can quite literally feel the air moving around you, especially in that high humidity. It was at that moment that we knew that this was very much somebody bad who was trying to reach out and touch us in a bad way, and that we were seated between him and the president. What was really interesting about that day for us too is that my wife had just told me days prior that I was going to be a father, that she was holding our newborn, or excuse me, our about to be soon to be now newborn daughter, Valentina. And I had my whole family with me there. So it changed the scenario for me where, I'm really not that concerned about my well-being. I've been in that situation before, but having brought my family there, seeing my friends and all of their smiling faces turning to horror in that moment, it was an awful feeling, of course, because I'm not armed. I don't know where this threat is coming from. There's not much I can do but to lay on top of my wife and just pray that that if anybody's going to be hurt, that it's going to be me. And meanwhile, of course, we're all thinking to ourselves, God forbid President Trump is lost today, because we don't know what tomorrow is going to look like if that happens. And it was a very scary situation or scenario to even think of. So looking back after, speaking about all of that, a lot of people ask me, what did you see about the security that day that was different or stood out to you from all of the other things? And the answer truly is not much, Sal. Not much. I mean, I got to tell you, the law enforcement officers and Secret Service agents that I saw inside the venue with us were jovial, they were upbeat, they were doing their job to the utmost, they were professional, and not only were they trying to worry about security in general, they were also taking on the role of trying to be the caretaker of 10,000 people or more who were trying desperately to find a reprieve from the brutal heat. So they were also taking care of us by way of making sure that we had shade, that we had water, getting the people who passed out from heat exhaustion into the medical tent. And so they performed all of those various functions honorably and with honor, and I'll stand by that. The thing that I did notice, though, however, was that there were a lot of rooftops that seemed to me that they were a little bit, they were a little bit close. Of course, whenever you see these things, you think, okay, surely there are law enforcement agents on these things.
So
For
I
me,
see
though,
it right there. See this picture? Look how far away the shooter is. And the security sniper's got a, like, I know this is I don't know. I would say I don't know if this communication between local cops and the Secret Service going on here, or what kind of what the breakdown was. But from this angle here, I would have had that top roof. I would have had people on there already saying, I would have had that down, like taken down. Like I would have been up there. I would have had guys up there say, no, we're gonna have an extra layer, and that didn't happen. Because that's a direct line of sight, in my opinion. I can see it from here.
Sure. So a couple things about that picture there, Sal. And you're right, it is far away. However, I got to tell you, being on the ground there, it's a whole lot closer than you can really understand looking at that. And I want to take this a step further too and tell you that anybody who grew up in a place like Butler County or rural Pennsylvania or New York or New Jersey who has experience with firearms or hunting could have taken that shot every day and it wouldn't have been an issue. So the fact that this guy missed is truly miraculous because that was a shot that was doable. But past that, I want to go back to the idea of what Overwatch protection should have looked like. Here's what I do understand. And a lot of it still is things that I heard through other sources and third party, members of the law enforcement community, what have you. A couple things to ponder on here. First of all, remember that when the Secret Service director then, right, Joe Biden, Secret Service director, was asked, why wasn't there somebody on that roof? She replied that the steep nature of that roof or the slope was so much so that it wouldn't have been safe or viable to put somebody up on top of it. That was ridiculous. I went up on that roof. Actually, I went with a congressional delegation. We took a tour of that site and I helped to walk folks around during that. That was absurd. I mean, the slope of that roof was not too steep. So that was one, too. You had what I heard was a breakdown in communication between the Secret Service and all of the other law enforcement agencies. And by the way, I can tell you too that we have something in Butler County called the CERT team. Think of it as a county SWAT team. And what we have are municipal officers. So communities like mine, Slippery Rock, have people who are trained and part of this unit that we then loan to the CERT team for instances as these. But they were not communicating on the same radio, right? They weren't on the same wavelength. And I also heard, too, that the Secret Service denied or did not perform what I would call a rock talk in the Marine Corps, which is it was a briefing right ahead of this. Like, hey, here's what our channels are going to be. Here's how we're going to communicate. Here are the certain thresholds that need to be met for certain things to happen. If they're not being met, here's what our standard operating procedures would be. You would think that the Secret Service, being in charge of the overall security there, because it's a presidential visit, would have said, you know what, maybe this is something we should do. I also learned that that was not the case. Right. And so you do have a breakdown in communication there, from what I understand. Having said that, the local law enforcement agencies that are around there are trying their very best to perform security functions. But ultimately, Sal, and this will resonate with you as a law enforcement officer, as well as I do, when the United States Secret Service, FBI, CIA, Department of Homeland Security are on the job, they are on top of the hill, right? They're king of the hill. They wear the crown and they call the shots ultimately. And so those lower department level functions are deferring, or at least they're told that they are to defer to those higher agencies. And so I truly believe that there was a great breakdown in the responsibility, right, or the duty of the United States Secret Service and those folks. Something else to consider here, too, is that Jill Biden was making a visit to the city of Pittsburgh, which was just 45 minutes south of Butler, on the same day that President Trump was coming. Now, that was very deliberate. They sent her there because they knew he was going to be with us in Butler County. Now, am I going to say that they did that knowing that it was going to pull Secret Service detail away from the president? No, I won't say that in particular. But did they certainly not help the situation by making things even less safe by having the First Lady of the United States and former President Trump, then about to be current President Trump, there in Butler. No, they didn't help. They didn't make things easy. And so, therefore, I think that that was a great disservice that they did to President Trump and all of us who were there that day, knowing full well that having Joe Biden there was going to pull away Secret Service resources from us. And so, ultimately, I think that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and the Biden-Harris administration put President Trump and all of the rally goers in Butler that day at a severe disadvantage and put us in harm's way. And it's unfortunate. And I'm glad that some folks have answered for that. I know that the Secret Service director resigned, but I still don't think that it's enough. We're looking for answers. People ask me all the time, what's going on after? The truth is, I don't have an answer for you, Sal. Everything has been very quiet since then, but I am confident that President Trump and his team around him are doing all they can to be deliberate in the investigation of this and to be deliberate in the release of information related to it. Because as you know, as a law enforcement officer, Sal, sometimes whenever you let too many things out to the public at once, you then diminish your potential for achieving success on the back end of an investigation by accidentally alerting people to the fact that you're on to them. And so I'm hopeful that there's a reason behind this.
I do too. I think America deserves answers here. I mean, I have right here, I got in the comments, Anthony says, what confuses me is that the Secret Service sniper returned fire immediately, indicating that he was already locked in on the kid. So why did he wait for the kid to get rounds off? That's something that Anthony's actually saying, something that many people I know actually told me, like, and being on the job, that's what we you know, we talk amongst ourselves, like, you don't even wait, you just fire right away. We have someone else, Chronicles of the Collapse. Shout out to them. They're always in the comments. There was a second shooter in the woods, according to live news feeds at the time, as well as EMS audio released RE, a suspect down near the water tower. Then also, we have Rob Lukash, is the co-host of the Executive Perspective here, and he's a retired deputy chief of NYPD, by the way. He says Secret Service is in charge, but they should had the building covered by foot posts over the hood meetings happening all the time in New York. Additionally, thank you for your service. I think that's right. And I just to go back to a little bit what we saw, what we're hearing here from the comments. When you were there, you heard these shots. Did you think they came from one area, or did you hear anything that would lead you to believe it came from a different direction as well? Basically, two shooting locations.
Yeah. So, look, I think it's very important in situations like this that we don't get caught up too much in speculation or in gossip or in rumor or in conjecture, because that also will help to make difficult the job of law enforcement agencies who are trying to get an answer for this, right? However, I will tell you, just from my perspective, keep in mind where I was. We're in a fishbowl, Sal. Okay,
Correct.
so the air is humid. We're surrounded by tens of thousands of people. There's a fishbowl made by bleachers around the president's podium. And so, you know, the sound is kind of off. I don't have a great view outside of my immediate perimeter. I can't see what's coming from outside. I will say, though, immediately behind us, about 15 feet where the bleachers were, where Corey Compratore and his family were sitting, I did hear a lady, because I'm also, you know, not only am I on the ground and I'm trying to get my family down around me and cover my wife, I'm scanning, because I hear a lady behind me screaming, he's here, and pointing at the bleachers. I immediately thought they're saying he's here, as in the shooter is here inside with us. And many of us believe the shooter was inside seating the bleachers. I think, though, what she was trying to say was Corey Compratore is here. He's been hit. But, you know, in that moment when you're in shock like that, many people can't react the way that they might otherwise do it. And so immediately then I realized that there was fire coming from outside of the perimeter. And I did notice the snipers on top of the roof on the two barns that were behind the president's podium sighted in my direction to my 6 o'clock. However, it's something that I want to touch on here real quick, because a lot of people ask me, did you see them locked in on that space before they actually took a shot? Well, yes and no, but here's something else that, again, you're not really going to get if you just take a look at the pictures there. It's something that you wouldn't see unless you were there that day and you saw the setup. Not only were the bleachers blocking some of the view, you also had tall trees. And keep in mind, it's July, so they're fully with leaves.
Yeah.
The angle of the snipers, the two snipers, to the rooftop where the shooter was, in addition to that little bit of slope that the shooter was on, where he was then down below the slope so that only the top of his head and his rifle were over it, made, I'm sure, for some difficult vantage points or views by those snipers. And the second thing that I want to bring up here is I'm not sure what it looks like on the domestic front, but I can tell you for us, in the Marine Corps, in a place like Afghanistan or Iraq or what have you, if you were going to take a shot at somebody, you had to have a couple of things. First of all, it was positive ID, right? You had to identify that there was somebody who did pose a threat. They do have a weapon in their hands. It's pointed at you and they're about to shoot you. Now, those are the kinds of standard operating procedures that we held out of country. I can only imagine what the rules of engagement are for domestic security forces here, right? I mean, because think about it. We're not talking about Afghans or the Taliban anymore, the potential Taliban or Iraqi insurgent. We're now talking about American citizens. And so I'm sure that the United States Secret Service and other law enforcement agencies here in the United States are very deliberate whenever they raise their weapon. In fact, I would venture to say they don't raise their weapon unless they intend to use it. And so even if that individual or those individuals were locked onto that rooftop, I don't know what their sight was. And so I can't say for sure why it is that they halted. What I will tell you was that they did engage very quickly after those shots were fired. Now, it seemed on the ground like it was forever, right? I heard a couple of shots. They came in very quick succession. There was one followed by quick succession of rounds. And then I heard the thunder that was the returning fire from the sniper up on top of one of those barns behind the podium. That's all that I was able to observe from my point of view. And so, again, I don't want to speculate on what it was that was going outside. I heard people say that they saw another shooter. I heard people say they saw a shooter in that water tower that was near us as well. I can't confirm those things. What I can confirm for you, however, was, though, that there was indeed at least one shooter on the rooftop that you and I have identified and that we know of. And it was an awful situation to be in. And I really hope that we learn from situations like that and we make sure that they never happen again.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping for. I don't want to see anything like that again, no matter who it is speaking. Just like what happened last night with this radical that decided to take the lives of two innocent people for some crazy agenda that they believe is some left-wing manifesto he leaves behind, talking about radical stuff. That's the problem here, because this kid that did the same thing. And actually, see, in the comments, a few things I want to show. So True Detective said these guys burned local law enforcement, and it really looks clear that they were doing the best they could with a deliberately messy op from the federal government. I think there could be something to that, only because I'm a cop, and I'll tell you, cops are the first to respond. And most of the time, I'm going to say like 9 out of 10, they have the right answers. They're very quick on their feet. And when they first go on a scene, they take control of a scene, they spread out, or they make crime scenes smaller or bigger, whatever's going on, until they get more info. But the local cop, they're the ones, I believe they saw this guy, and you saw them maneuver. I saw some of the body cameras. So the cops there at Butler County, that's like me showing up or NYPD showing up. And usually we're attentive, we're alert, and we do what we're supposed to do right away. It's the other agencies that are not so used to that theme, because a lot of times, look, Secret Service guy, they go out, but there's times they're not going out. There's a lot of downtime. There's a lot of, NYPD cop or cop in general, we'll say Butler County, they're interacting with the public 24/7. You walk outside, people coming up to you. They want to hear about what's going on. They want to know why, if they feel safe, they don't feel safe. So those cops on the ground that initially responded, I think they're doing everything I just think that there's a breakdown in communication, because they know what they're doing, but communicating with the Secret Service and other agencies, that's where there's usually that misfire. There's a liaison you got to speak to, all this stuff. Whereas the local cops, if they have more control, things wouldn't be like that, because they would quarter off some sections, don't allow people to go here, don't do that. Kind of like when you go to a rally that's in the street or something, you see these parades. The police always have that down first, pat. Why? Down pat, because they set up the perimeter. They set up the zones. They didn't do this here. You can clearly tell I don't know who's in charge. When you hear the I don't know who's in charge thing and people pointing fingers, that's where you get the mistakes and why you see little holes. I'm only breaking this down as someone law enforcement. And Rob Lukash, that again here, remember with counter sniper teams, one is a spotter and the other is the shooter. Totally agree with JD. And there's somebody who he was in charge of ESU, so he had the specialty group in the NYPD. So he could tell you he agrees with you for a reason, because he knows exactly how it would be handled. Here we are seeing it's slightly handled differently, and we don't. That is the question of why everybody here, and I see the comments of people just saying it's frustrating to know people see people running around. They're hearing now again, because it is speculative, but the acoustics, when you hear something in an area like this, something that's heard in front of you might be this way. We don't know because you're standing in a zone where the acoustics can be affected. But what can't be affected is what people were seeing. If they saw someone running around with a rifle, if they saw some guy, another location, something going on in that water tower, somebody going in and out of there as this is going on or right before, and you go, what is that about? That's different. That's what we don't know. And I'm not to sound speculative, but there is video and evidence showing people see something going on in that water tower at the exact same time. So these are the things that we're trying to get to the bottom of. And I just believe the people they really need to hunker down and say, we want answers for this. We don't care what it is. I know Dan Bongino said something that he wants to put something out, but he's already got a lot of flack for the Epstein file stuff. But so, yeah, True Detective says it looks like we're not mad enough about this, but it's really the media memory holding the wall thing. We're not going to let this go away. No, I don't think we shouldn't, because we've seen
Absolutely
this.
not.
We've seen
You're
this.
right. We shouldn't let it go. Absolutely not. And that's why, I've actually taken some flack from Democrats who say that I'm trying to use this as a platform to, to increase my my network, or, my ability to get on shows like yours, Sal. But we have a responsibility and a duty as American citizens, as patriotic Americans. And by the way, as a Butler County and somebody who knows the Compertour family, who deserves answers more than anybody, we cannot let the memory of Corey Compertour, what happened that day, die, because the media and the left want nothing more than for you and I to stop talking about this. We cannot talk enough about it. And I'm hopeful that as we continue to talk about it, it will continue to put pressure on people who are in a position to give us some kind of answer, to understand what it is that went down that day, and understand how it was that was able to happen. But Sal, there is one more thing that I want to tell you and your viewers, and it's something that I think that is being lost here too, that I think is a really pertinent piece of this. We have 3 county commissioners in Butler County. 2 of them are Republicans. There's 1 Democrat county commissioner. His name is Boozle. The reason that we have a Democrat county commissioner is because by law, we're not allowed to have a complete majority on that board of 3. And so therefore, he's the third loser. And so his participation trophy is that he gets to keep a seat on that. He is a bootlicker for the Democratic Party. He was up the rear ends of Governor Shapiro and of Biden and of Harris, likely hoping for some kind of appointment or job that never happened for him. And I know for a fact that he was trying to stand in the way of mutual aid being offered by Butler County to the president and his detail. He insisted that a contract was signed so that the Trump campaign would have to pay the county of Butler to offer mutual aid. You and I are well aware of what mutual aid means. It's just what you do in the law enforcement community. You offer help to agencies as they ask for it, and sometimes even when they don't ask for it, because it's the right thing to do. And yet this guy tried to stand in the way of it. And I also have heard, too, that he was trying to suggest that there would be consequences, that he was going to make a stink about this. He was going to get DNC lawyers on this, and he was going to let everyone know that the Republicans in charge in Butler County were using taxpayer dollars to help the Trump campaign. Now, am I going to blame him, of course, for the shooting that occurred that day? No, I can't do that. But can I say that he helped to add to the safety of the situation that day? No, he certainly didn't. And so I think that, again, these are all pertinent pieces of information that should be considered whenever we're looking at the big picture here, and the breakdown in communication and the lack of cooperation between the then Biden-Harris administration and the United States Secret Service, and allowing for our local law enforcement agencies and Butler County CERT, or ESU, however you want to call it, to have the tools to be successful in this endeavor. And they set us up for failure. And one of your guests just said this, but yeah, they tried to burn us. They tried to put it all on our shoulders and say, well, it was the local municipalities and it was the Butler CERT team and the Pennsylvania State Police who failed in this endeavor. Absolutely not. Everything that I saw that day suggests otherwise. And, listen, heads should roll for this. The people who were in charge and that were put in charge by the Biden-Harris regime should answer for this. And so, again, I'm hopeful that we don't just get answers, but that we also start to see people held accountable to it. Sal, you and I were just talking about accountability. We cannot let these things go by the wayside.
No. And that's the thing. And, Carmine Capatori lost his life, fellow Paisan, firefighter. Someone has to answer for this. I don't care who it is, as far as agency-wise. A failure broke down. There was a failure here of epic proportions, and no one has answered the call. I know the former Secret Service director, she's gone, but she wasn't even there. Someone on that scene, something happened. And I see Chronicles Collapse says, let's talk about he had second shooter possibility immediately struck down as conjecture. LOL. Actually, no. I tell you that that is a possibility. We just haven't heard. What you really need is President Trump to say, I want the whole thing reviewed. And the minute it's done, I want a breakdown. And that entire report is, whether it goes to Congress, it goes to the hearing, you can read this publicly, and then people will know step by step what everyone there, and it could be a long one, it could be thousands of pages long. All the people that were law enforcement there, eyewitnesses, whatever they have, testimonies, video, put it together and show the American public. And that's it's the only way you're going to ever have this result. And then if there's someone that should be prosecuted for whether they did their job or didn't do their job, that's what I would do. I would lead to say, okay, someone should be prosecuted. If there's a chance to prosecute someone, do it. There's a picture of Carmine. It's this shouldn't be forgotten. I know people forget that's quick. Like, people forget about 9/11. Again, low information people, just a short memory span. They just, whatever they say on TV, they follow. 2 minutes later, they're watching something else. That is an issue in this country. The low, they take, like, people have, I think, a 30-second span of watching something and it's over. They just can move on. It used to be like a minute and 30 seconds, a minute 45 seconds. That's dwindled down as time goes on. I believe I just read it's like 30 seconds, their attention span. You need to expand your attention span, because if you're not alert, if you're not informed, situations like this occur. I mean, here's True Detective again. All the local guys had that put me in coach look on their faces, and the red tape boys were just fumbling over and over again. He's right. Rob Lukash, my experience with Secret Services, they think they know what they're doing, most are too green. In New York, they depend on us for response teams and additional CSTs. Local PD knows the landscape. See, I'm telling you, if this was a local issue, local cops taking, I don't think this goes down the way it does. I think they would have cut off. They would have definitely barricaded. You wouldn't be able to go up to that rooftop. I'm telling you, if no one on that roof, if this is a local operation, no one's on that rooftop. No cop is going to say, I'm going to let someone on a vantage point. That's perfect. I'm going to let him just, wander around. That's what I think is going on here. I think that's the truth of what happened.
I agree, Sal. I agree. Yeah, and if there's one thing that I would go out on a limb on and that I would speculate on, it would be the fact that I don't think that the Biden-Harris administration would have been upset if something bad had happened to that day. And I wouldn't rule out the possibility that the leadership of the United States Secret Service at that time, under the leadership of Biden-Harris, or whatever kind of leadership you want to believe that they were able to offer, deliberately pulled resources, because you also heard them talking about the fact that they did not want to front or put up, Secret Service detail for the president. They were trying deliberately to take it away from President Trump and his family. And so again, I think that emboldened these lunatics, some people who thought, what, now's the time for me to go and reach President Trump and touch him in a bad way. And unfortunately, this is the product. So, again, it's difficult for me because I'm just telling you what it was that I was able to see. And by the way, I saw somebody here, one of your guests said that the possibility of a second shooter is immediately struck down as conjecture. It's not. Is there a possibility? Absolutely. I'm only able, though, however, to talk to what it is that I saw and what I know based on what has been given to me by law enforcement officers who were on the ground there that day and what I was able to observe myself. I'm not going to say that there's not a possibility, of course, but people ask me often, was there a second shooter? And unless I'm able to, with some fact, believe truly in my heart that there certainly was a second shooter, I'm not just going to go off on a limb here and say, yeah, I think there was a second shooter because it's what a lot of people are believing. I'm only going to tell you what it is that I saw that day. So don't misunderstand me when I say I think there are a number of possibilities and that we need to investigate all of them. Hopefully we get the truth here soon.
Yeah, I say the same thing. It's people just get their emotions into it because they really believe in this second shooter, because again, this same scenario happened with JFK, their whole thing with Ronald Reagan. It's always a possibility, whether they actually admit it or not, or there's evidence of this is another thing. And you stay to what's fact-based like me. So yeah, it's a possibility, but we want to know what's the evidence, which is why I think they should open up a whole investigation into this, meaning we want a report. We want to see if there's anyone that did anything they shouldn't have, be held accountable, and then release this to the public to show a breakdown of how this started, what transpired, and how this ends. That's the part. There's no ending. It's just, well, it's this one random guy, Thomas Matthew Crooks, and then that's it. Nothing to see here. Let's not talk about it anymore. Oh, the Secret Service director lost her job. So that's it. No, it's not it. She doesn't even, in my opinion, she's not even on the ground. She's not even a factor other than she runs a Secret Service, but she's not there. As you know, the people that are on the ground are running the operation. So who are they? What happened there? It says, Rob Lukash here says, JD, totally respect the honesty. We need more honest politicians like yourself. Hopefully moving forward, your political aspirations reach national levels. You got people that see that I think I see that in you. You have the potential of doing that. And it's unfortunate what you're saying. I hope they take this serious, or what happened in Butler. Like, they should really look into this and announce these things to the public, because people want to know what happened here. I mean, what's your name here? Again, says Sal. How many times does social media get ahead and give us visuals on what's going on before it happens? This was one day in history. We were watching it unfold. A situation with a gun before the shot. She's right, actually. If you actually see it, This guy was on social media. They were following him prior to this whole incident, which is not like, I think if you're going to be a radical like this other idiot from last night, you should know that everyone's got a camera.
Yeah. So Sal, I'm really glad that we're talking about this idea right now, because first of all, and this is the thing I love about X, right? And what I call like this new wave of journalists, where everybody with the phone is now able to add to the story and give us the facts, right? And I was so appreciative of all of the footage that came out after the fact of those people who were sitting in that lawn outside of the venue, by the way, nearest that rooftop, that were getting that guy on their cameras, and you could hear them saying, there's someone on the roof, he's got a gun, I think he's got a gun. And I'm really appreciative of that. But here's what I do want to say, and the reason why I'm not so quick to say that there was a second shooter, especially that there was one in the water tower. Those same people who had that guy in their sights with their cameras on the roof outside in that lawn were sitting in the very same lawn that hosted that water tower that was way up in the air, that everybody would have seen somebody climbing up onto a ladder, and everybody would have seen them leaning over the rail of. And so when I don't see any footage of somebody going up to that, cutting the deadbolt off of the fence that was immediately surrounding that water tower, climbing up that long ladder that was, it was 75 to 100 feet in the air, and then leaning over and taking shots, but having footage of Crooks on the rooftop there, it
Yeah.
makes me wonder why wouldn't we have that footage as well? And so that's why I'm not so quick to say, was there a second shooter? Now, was there another shooter from elsewhere? It's possible, but something else too that I think about very often is that for people on the ground, especially people who aren't used to hearing gunfire and understanding the trajectory of weapons like that or how acoustics can be affected, it's possible too that the shots of, because there were multiple snipers, and I don't think a lot of people know this, there were more shots than one taken by counter snipers. And the only one that people focus on is the big boom at the very end of it all that was taken by the Secret Service sniper that was on top of the barn immediately behind the president. There were other snipers around. And I know for an absolute fact that there was more than one sniper, counter sniper shot, excuse me, fired at Crooks. Is it possible that that shot or one of those shots led people to believe that there were multiple shooters shooting from multiple directions? I don't know. And that's why I say I'm not comfortable with settling on something and saying this is an absolute fact.
I see. Yeah, because there's more. See, Chronicles of Collapse says EMS stated a suspect was down by the water tower. No word from me about anyone being on it. And also, the trajectory along the seating doesn't line up with Crooks's position. And that's what people saw. Like, this is one of the videos of people seeing this. That looks just.
Yeah. And Sal, only playing devil's advocate here, but I understand how the trajectory might seem very off. And you could say, well, how is it that that he could make a shot at this angle or what have you? But you have to remember too, and again, you wouldn't know this unless you were under distress, right? Either shooting a weapon at someone or being on receipt of somebody shooting at you. When you're under distress like that, especially if you're undertrained, your senses are heightened, your adrenaline is going crazy, your hands start shaking, and that's why they teach us in the Marine Corps to hit the buttons on the side of our M16, right, to either eject the magazine out or to send the bolt home on your rifle. You actually use your whole hand and slap it. You don't try to use your fine motor skills because you don't have them. So there's also a really good chance too that in that moment, if the shooter understands that he's getting negative attention and he's about to take incoming fire, he's also trying to, because I remember these quick succession of shots that were fired by him after the first very deliberate one were so quick that it made me think this guy knows that there are good guys that have him in his sights and he's short for this world right now. And at this point, he's desperate just to try to get shots off quickly in the hopes that one of them will hit the president or somebody. And again, I hate to speculate on this, but I'm just thinking, what would it be like to be in that situation? Chances are he shot in all manner of directions that he didn't really quite mean to because he knew that he didn't have that much time left.
Yeah. I mean, listen, it's fascinating to discuss all these I don't know if it's say what ifs or speculation. And then there's also facts because we're derided of the facts, the full facts, because they're derived of it because no one said this. Here it is. Here's the full top to bottom. It's just, everyone just speculating because they never told us the full truth. So, and again, here's Chronicles of Collapse. Again, like I said, no emotions here, just sharing info that sounds legit. Anthony DiMaggio, the shooter in the woods was the same guy on the grassy knoll. Yeah. And in Chronicles Collapse, again, even a reporter live stated there was a readjustment of the sniper appeared to come from the woods verbatim. Yeah, it's see, that's what it is. They kind of put that in your head. Yeah. And then that's what people.
But Sal, remember whenever I told you that there were trees that were near that rooftop?
Correct.
Those are part of the woods that people are referring to. And so again, unless you were there on the ground, it might seem like the woods in question are actually in a totally different place, but it was actually literally all in that one area. And so again, it would be easy for us. I mean, even me, like I said, I thought immediately, and all of us thought that there was a shooter inside. It wasn't until 10 seconds later we realized that the shots were coming from outside. And so, here's the thing I do want to say this because I don't want to keep going round robin in this. I'm appreciative of all the questions that people were asking, the questions being asked by people who were there with me that day, the questions being asked by the family, the questions being asked by people like you and all of your supporters and your guest here today. I'm appreciative of it because it's keeping the conversation going and it's keeping the memory of this thing alive. And ultimately, it's going to allow for us to find some kind of truth or honesty in it all. But more than that, the people on the ground that day who had the thought to take their phone out and to document these things, are real heroes in this scenario, because they are giving us some substance that we can actually use to help to make a good judgment calls on what we think happened that day. So thank you to you all for continuing this conversation.
Yeah, what's her name said again? Why isn't anyone reporting on Cooks and his family? Why do we know nothing about him? We know more about Ruth, the second shooter on the golf course, than we do about Cook and his family. Why?
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
It's like a mystery. I don't hear anything about this guy. It's like he's some random like guy that's some kind of nerd growing up, and then this happens, and that's it. Oh, he took some shooting classes. He went to the range or something. That's it. And they don't mention anything else, you know?
It is strange. It is very strange, especially since, this guy and his family are from Bethel Park, Pennsylvania. I mean, it's an hour or less away from the site of the shooting, from my community as well. It's really weird how it's just very quiet. But I can tell you too that something that sticks out to me in this conversation now is, that his parents were very much like under scrutiny, and everybody was all over them. And I understand the reasons why, of course. And I wonder if sometimes the reason why they've stopped talking about those folks is because maybe they've been absolved, and that they weren't involved, and that perhaps it's possible that the federal government or people agents and that are trying to protect them from the fallout, or being somehow accountable for the sins of their kid in this instance. And gosh, I mean, I can't even imagine what it would be like to learn or be told, right? Imagine at the end of that day, and they didn't know where their son was, I'm sure. And yet I'm sure at one point they got a phone call or knock on the door, or somebody found them wherever they were, and said, hey, we got to have a talk. Imagine hearing that. It's just, it's an awful thing to imagine.
Yeah, let's see here. So we haven't even, True Detective says we haven't even seen his phone. EMJE says very suspicious that we have no info on Crooks whatsoever. It's, there's a lot of questions here. And usually, like, look at what happened last night. Well, in this circumstance, the suspect, the shooter, he's captured, right? But look how you start to hear things rolling out from there, and you're putting the pieces together on this radical from last night that killed 2 innocent people. Here, it's just, there's nothing. There's just silence, and we don't know why. And that's, I know Hood Mayor NYC keeps saying that it's because Crooks is the CIA. He's on overseas on a mission. That's what people start to think that, And here, Chronicles of Collapse saying, telling EMJE in the comments because he's a patsy. So she's saying this guy's a patsy, which is another theory people are having. Because where is the background on this guy? I'm sure in the 60s with JFK, when they had the whole another guy,
Lee Harvey Oswald,
they probably couldn't find anything out about him either. And it was easy to control because you only had 3 major networks. But imagine back then them scrambling, trying to, let's not talk about this guy. But people want to know, because people need to, we went through 4 years of hearing that one particular day was the worst day in American history. It might have been the worst day ever. And it was a rally that turned into a riot, kind of, because of the situations that occurred in and around a building. And everyone should be condemned that ever voted for one person. And it was like the worst thing ever. You heard this for 4 years almost. And now it's like it almost never happened because their guy lost, right? But before that, they made that such a big issue. But the only person that died that day was actually someone in the Capitol by Capitol Police, right? Ashley Babbitt.
Yeah.
Here, you have an attempted assassination of the president, and it's a complete breakdown in agencies, communications, very little info over who the shooter was. People saying they saw things, and they're being told, you didn't see that. You're like a conspiracy theorist. And it's like, why so much attention there? And here with something really serious, don't ask questions. Don't look here. The narrative is what we tell you, and be quiet.
Right. And I think that that speaks to the comfortability that us as a society here in the United States have gotten used to just trusting that the government is here to tell us everything is going to be okay and that they're going to keep us safe always. And you and I, as Americans, not particularly you and I as individuals, but as a society, we have gotten very used to that and the idea that we can give up certain individual liberties for the promise of a little bit of safety. And so we've been conditioned to not ask questions. We've also been conditioned to trust that the mainstream media and that the newspapers and what have you are going to tell us the truth. And we found time and again that that's not the case. And so that's also why I'm so appreciative of people like you on X and in the social media space who are turning the legacy media upside down to start to offer some different news sources and a lot of honestly just honest sources, right? Like it's unadulterated, it's unfiltered, there is no script. You're not getting your talking points from some corporate office somewhere in New York City or in Los Angeles. You're just here as Sal Greco, and you and your guests and supporters are asking these questions, and I think it's a really healthy exercise for us as Americans to participate in. And so you're bringing back that unhealthy, excuse me, rather that healthy skepticism of people in positions of authority, right? And especially again, people who are in charge of the propaganda machine. Whenever it is that they tell us that there's nothing to see here, just move along, don't ask any questions, we'll handle it from here. So thank you for what you're doing to that effect as well.
Yeah, so I see Robert Smiley again. The audio of the shots sounds like 3 different weapons were fired. See, that's what I'm saying. That people are hearing things, and there's no answers to this. It's like, don't believe your ears. Everything is a lie. True detective. If this was Kamala, not Trump, they'd have a whole team of suits running a CSI tent on the spot. I think that's 100% right. I think he's got a point. I think if it was the other way around, forget about it. It would have been the end of the world. You would have had everyone there. EMGAJE says media ignored this, just like they ignored the fact that Biden was in a walking coma.
Yeah, the media's guilty of this. I'll never forget too. After that day, I mean, I'll never forget. I went to the RNC the very next day, but I couldn't sleep. I wasn't sleeping, and I was on the phone with a lot of folks like you, Sal. I remember watching a clip, and I want to say that it was CNN that saw that this was happening. Right, there was obviously a shooting, and what really pissed me off is that the people on the ground from those news agencies heard and could see, and yet I heard the anchor say, "Oh, it looks like the president fell." You're really gonna do that? You're gonna try to, even in that moment, you're gonna try to diminish, with the reality of the situation or disparage the president when we knew the truth, and that was that he was being shot at. Anybody would have known. I mean, you could even in some of those accounts, you could hear on the legacy media's footage, you could actually hear the rounds in some instances, and yet they still tried to underplay what was going on there. And so shame on them too. But luckily, we're here to tell the truth.
And all you want, JD, is the truth. Like,
Exactly.
I don't care what your opinions are, or, people's opinions are, how you feel about either Trump or Biden. We're worried about what they did, what they do for the American people that elected them. I mean, but you're not even being transparent when the former president was crapping his pants. He crapped his pants at the Vatican. They don't even want to
look what happened.
It's like, I don't get it. I think right here, this is the breakdown of the bullet. That's what we're showing here. How? See it?
Yeah.
So that
you can see he didn't fall. I mean, anybody who watched that knew right away something was going on there. But even in that moment, man, they couldn't help to but try to, make the president be viewed in a bad light.
I mean, look, right there, you can see it? That's where the sound is. He's not falling. And you can tell by the bullets what's going on. You can.
Yeah.
I don't.
Here's what's crazy too. They also said, look how his head is turned, Sal. You see how it's turned to the right? Now, if his right ear was damaged, right, or hit, and all these people said he wasn't shot, that was shrapnel from the podium or from the teleprompter. How the hell would a fragment of anything travel from this side of his head around to here to hurt him in that side of his head? I mean, can anybody explain that to me? And yet that's even still a talking point that the left likes to bring up, these lunatics that like to say this, he didn't get shot. That was shrapnel, or some even take it to a full-on like maniacal conspiracy that it was all false and they were just playing the sound of gunfire over those speakers to make us all think that he was under attack so he could win the election. I'm here to tell you, Sal, I was there. There was nothing fake about that day. And Corey Comparator was just feet behind me. Believe me when I tell you, there was nothing fake about that.
I say this, even what's her name said it, we need justice, fair investigation. I think we need to talk about this more. You need like someone like you that was on the ground could definitely be somebody who lays out what happened there, what truly happened, what you saw, what you witnessed, because you need everyone to speak, and then they do an investigation where they find out with everything what exactly. When it's not hard, it's just a lot of work, but I don't see anyone moving towards that. That's the problem. It's like, yeah, this happened. So what? The guy's dead, and that's it. Move along, nothing to see. That's the feeling that we're getting, and that's what we don't like. See, a truth detective said you'd see dotted lines in a Madden triangulation. Otherwise, no one's asking questions when it's up, boy, DJT. Then he said, sorry, that sounded too informal, but I think he's right. So I actually then, I think we can do this all day hitting on this, but I think we've pretty much laid down the foundation and groundwork for people to say, don't stop asking questions, and we need to revisit this and demand from Mr. Bongino and Cash Patel and others that you want the truth. And if Josh Shapiro, the governor of the Pennsylvania, where they're trying to cover this up and act like, then they need to be held accountable. But speaking of Pennsylvania, because you're the mayor of Slippery Rock, I was going to ask you, what's going on the ground there? How's public safety? How is, what's going on if any elections going on there? Of course, we want to keep it to, you're there, so we have a Republican in office, so we need to keep that going. Otherwise, if it fell the other way, you might have more radical incidents happen. And the state in general of Pennsylvania is obviously Governor Shapiro. He has his own issues there.
Mm-hmm. Well, Sal, I'm glad that you're on the topic of Pennsylvania politics. And I do just want to say, we just had a primary election day in Pennsylvania on Tuesday. And I want to take this opportunity to say to all of you, I don't know if any of you are listening from Pennsylvania, if you have friends or family in Pennsylvania, but look, voter turnout was absolutely pitiful. It was abhorrent. Democrats outperformed us in a lot of ways. And we are on track if we continue this apathy, because I hear all the time people say, why'd I got to vote again? We already got Trump in there. Listen, we got to vote in every single election because we're on track to another 2018 where we're about to hand President Donald J. Trump a Congress that is going to be overturned if we don't turn out to vote, and he's not going to be able to enact the America First agenda. And more importantly, then, even on the local level, when you take a look at offices like mine, if you don't have people like me and my colleagues who are in council, township supervisors, judges, sheriffs, etc., who are going to be in office that are going to help to create a strong foundation upon which the America First agenda can be completed, you are going to see a continuous descent into chaos, into a lack of prosperity and a lack of public safety that was allowed to occur under the failed Democrat leadership over the 4 years that we had before the current President Trump administration. And so I just hope that everybody that's listening here will take this warning here. I'm not saying that we're finished by any means. We're still very strong. However, we need to get our heads out of our rear ends, and we need to show up in a big way in November to make sure that we are voting for our conservative and for our Republican candidates so that we can continue to do good things. Now, some things are very interesting going on here in Pennsylvania politics. I do want to take a step to go to Pittsburgh, which is about an hour south of me. And what's really interesting about Allegheny County that's hosted, where Pittsburgh is hosted, it actually has the largest concentration of Republican voters of any county in Pennsylvania. And yet Pittsburgh, like most major cities, is this Democrat stronghold. And we have Mayor Ed Gainey there, who's been the mayor now for a few years. He was actually, he had his back, he had the Democrat Party, his own Democrat Party, turn their backs on him and start to get behind a guy named O'Connor. And so Ed Gainey, the sitting Democrat incumbent mayor of Pittsburgh, just lost the Democratic primary to this guy O'Connor, who honestly, in my opinion, is not much better than him. He's just a little bit more eloquent and polished. And so people think he's much better than Ed Gainey, but he's saying all the same things. He's just putting different makeup on it. This guy is about to take over Pittsburgh again, and those people are not learning from the failed Democrat failures, right, that they've had to endure for a long time. If you go over to Philadelphia, much like New York City, I hate to say it, but Philadelphia is in shambles. You have Democrats mismanaging that place as far as public safety is concerned. You have DAs like Larry Krasner who aren't doing their job, and they're letting murderers and rapists go and pedophiles go. And our state legislature or at least the Republicans in the state legislature, are trying desperately to impeach and hold accountable people like Larry Krasner and judges like him, DAs like him, who are letting violent criminals go. But it's very hard because right now our state legislature has a Democrat majority that will not allow, and of course the governor, right, Shapiro, who will not allow for people like Larry Krasner to be held accountable for their failures. And so public safety is falling by the wayside in these big cities. But make no mistake about it, Sal, all of the places in between the big cities, the places between Pittsburgh and between Philadelphia, places like Slippery Rock, we are safe and sound. We're doing everything we can to support the men and women who wear the uniform. We back the blue wholeheartedly, and we're behind them 110%. We're going to make sure that they're doing their job because we understand that we have no prosperity in our communities if we're not safe. And thanks to the men and women in law enforcement, we are able to create an environment that's conducive to economic growth and development so that we can achieve all of the great many things we want to as part of the American dream.
That's what I like to hear, because look at this scene. This is in Pennsylvania. I think this is atrocious. So this is what goes on in these big cities. So that people understand. And look, this is like a scene out of a movie. Like you're like, this is a desolate area. Meanwhile, it's a functioning city, and you're like, what is the big idea with that? But I also want to ask you, what are your thoughts on the Trump presidency currently? What's going on? What are your thoughts? Is well past 100 days now, but the first few months now, we're like five almost. We're going to be 6 months in shortly. What are your thoughts on the presidency?
I think for those of us who have supported the president, it's everything that we've wanted and more, and it's everything that we had hoped to see during his first term. But of course, you know, his hands were tied for a lot of reasons. Democrats controlled the United States Congress, and so they did everything they could to put roadblocks in front of him. Now we have a second term President Trump who knows, you know, I've got 4 years to get the job done, and they are hitting the ground. Well, they hit the ground running. You can tell by all of the great many executive orders that he's implemented. I mean, things that are addressing the heart of the issues that you and I care the most about. And it might seem like a lot of it is part of the culture war, but it seems to me and to everybody who has a brain that President Trump, through these executive orders and through his cooperation with our representatives, representatives in the United States Congress, that he is dedicated to making sure that the wrongs of the past, of the Biden-Harris administration, of the Obama administration, of the Clinton administration, are being addressed, so that when he does leave us in 4 years, we will be left with a better America than we inherited before he took office. And I'm very pleased. I also understand that that great big beautiful bill that he's been touting for a long time was just passed in the United States House of Representatives. I know that the president and his team are on cloud nine about that. I'm hopeful that it will be used to serve the best interests of the United States. Everybody, black, white, gay, straight, Democrat, Republican alike, will be served by this administration. And I do think for sure, Sal, that as we get further away from President Trump's administration, history will look kindly on him, because we'll be able to take a look objectively and say that guy actually gave a shit about us, and he gave a shit about this country.
Yeah, I would never fault that part of Trump. I think he does care about the country. He obviously does. I mean, he's won 2 elections. Actually, might have been a third one also. Can't say that out loud though. But
I think he did. I think it was stolen. I'll say that right now. You know, I think there were improprieties that definitely made it easy for Biden Harris to do what they did to us. And I'm not shy about that, Sal. Nobody should be.
Yeah, but I'm saying like that one. I know that's always a tricky subject, but I don't fault him for things, but I could fault that bill you're talking about. So it took 5 months to pass the first piece of legislation in a Republican Congress and Senate with a Republican president. That's a problem. I see a lot of them doing media. Look at me, self-impressed. You see me all the time in the show talking about self-impressed people. But these people in Congress and the Senate, you're Republicans. You're not holding these hearings are like they're a joke. It's like the same old. You're not holding anyone accountable from the past that you said we were going to hold accountable. And you're not passing any legislation when you have the president that will just sign anything you have. It's the agenda, right? Why does it take over 5 months to pass one piece of legislation when there's so many? What is going on there in Congress and the Senate? What happened? He froze? Oh boy, we'll try to get JD back. I find that question I'm asking about Congress and Senate, I just saw them pass one bill. I didn't see them pass. There's tons of legislation that should be forthcoming by Republicans. They don't even put anything forward. So I don't know what's the story there with that. Hey, look, there's JD on the podium. We're in a Trump rally. Let's play this.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Marine veteran and Mayor of Slippery Rock, John David Longo, to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Good afternoon, Butler County. I thought we were at a Trump rally. Let's make the president hear us from the sky. Good afternoon, Trump country. Come on, let's go. Woo! Nice. Good. My name is John David Longo. I have the privilege of serving as mayor of Slippery Rock, Pennsylvania, as district chairman for the Butler County Republican Committee, and as a founding member of the United Republicans of Butler County. And let me first say that it feels so good to be back here with you, patriotic, God-fearing American men and women, in support of our president, Donald J. Trump. Thank you. Now, the campaign has given me the privilege of leading you all in our most sacred pledge of allegiance to our flag and to our republic. Before we get there, I ask, ladies and gentlemen, that as we say these words together, please reflect on the colors of our flag, everything that they represent, and the fact that those colors never, ever run. So at this time, please rise if you are able. Take your hats off. Place your right hand over your hearts. Face our star-spangled banner and say with me, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all very much. May God bless you. God bless Trump. God bless the United States of America. Thank you.
That was great, by the way, JD. That was great.
Sal, thank you. I lost you there for a second. I'm not quite sure what happened, but thanks for being gracious and allowing me to sign back in here. And thanks for playing that clip. That was that's what I'm talking about. Whatever it is that you just felt right there, listening to me and the crowd, recite the Pledge of Allegiance at that rally, man. It still gives me chills to that day. And despite the horror of that day, I still look back on it with a kind of fondness in a weird way, because there were people there who were hugging and smiling and shaking hands. And even as chaos ensued, I never saw a group of people so calm and resolved in that moment to stand fast. And, we found inspiration in President Trump whenever he stood up in front of us and raised his fist in defiance and said, fight, fight, fight. That's the warrior ethos that is the MAGA movement and our MAGA America First family.
The real MAGA movement. I'm going to ask you something a little bit about that, because there is some questionable things going on with that. But I was asking you about the bills, right? Do you have any idea why Republicans are not putting it's one bill they just passed. They've been there over 5 months. Because when the Democrats are in charge, you see constant movement. When Republicans are in charge and a Republican president, it's like they're sleepwalking.
Here's the thing, Sal. I mean, I don't know if you guys remember, but President Trump's first term, he came into a Republican-controlled Congress, and they squandered that too, right? And do I have an answer for you? Well, I don't have an exact answer, but I can tell you something, and look, I'm grateful to the gentleman who said that, he liked what I was doing as a politician. But I got to be honest with you and say, I hate that term. I like to consider myself a public servant. I think that's the problem that we have here. A lot of the people in the United States Congress aren't public servants. They're politicians. They're there to get ahead. They're there to serve themselves. They're self-important. Like you said, Sal, they're there and self-impressed. And every one of them is trying to use this moment to gain something for themselves when they should be getting in lockstep behind the president. Because ultimately, the president is the embodiment of what the people of the United States, the overwhelming majority of the electorate, said that we wanted moving forward with our country, and they're not using this. And so, just like I said a little bit ago, when I said we're heading toward another 2018, we're doing it right now. And the United States Congress representatives on the Republican Party, just as much as the Democrats sometimes, are responsible for squandering this moment where we could be making some serious headway. And that's the answer that I have for you, Sal. And so I also recommend to everybody listening here, not just to get out and vote, but be vocal. If you see your representative in the United States Congress, whether it's your congressman in the House or your senator, and they're not doing what you elected them to do, and they're not doing what they should be doing by supporting the president that you and I elected, you need to call their phones. You need to make sure they understand that you're pissed off. You need to write them letters. You need to show up at their town halls. You need to send them emails, and you need to say, and you don't need to be rude about it. You can be stern though, and say, listen, I elected you to do this job. And if you're not going to do it, you can rest assured you are not going to get my vote next time. And believe me when I tell you, that'll give them a swift kick in the ass, and they'll do what they're supposed to do, because we're coming up to midterms. So don't be scared to remind them midterms are coming up, and we will find a replacement for you if you don't do what it is that's expected of you.
That's what I'd like to hear. Because look, there's a lot of executive actions. You're right, but there shouldn't be, because you control both. You control Congress and the Senate. Why does he have to make executive action when they could pass legislation? Which, I don't know, they're on TV all the time, but they never seem to do anything. And they did the same thing last time. So you can't put Republicans in charge. That's what it looks like to me. They don't know how to use power, is the line I like to use.
Well, and more importantly, Sal, they're all more they're all more scared about getting reelected than they are about serving. And so as we get nearer to midterms, everybody's starting to feel the heat, and nobody more than me right now, because I'm in the middle of a reelection campaign, and I have an R next to my name in a university Democrat town, and people are after me. I mean, there's big Democrat money that's after me right now. I mean, I have the lieutenant governor of Pennsylvania actually came here to my county to hang out with that Democrat county commissioner I told you about earlier. They raised all sorts of money. And where did they dump it? They dumped it in Slippery Rock. Why? Because I have an R next to my name, and I spend time with the president of the United States. We have a university that makes them think we're vulnerable. So, but I digress. Our members in the legislature are scared about getting reelected. They're feeling the heat, knowing that because President Trump is in office, that they're going to have to fight this great battle. And so they're trying very hard to try to seem more impartial and, talk a little bit softer and try to appeal to the Democrats and folks on the left side of the aisle. And they're making a grave mistake, because they're making the mistake that they made back in 2018. They thought, well, maybe if we appease them a little bit and throw them a bone, these people will back off. Guess what? They're never backing off. You and I know that. They're vicious. They will stop at nothing to defeat us in our mission. And we need to come to play this, to fight this fight with that same passion, right? And that same resolve that they have.
Yeah. I just find this fascinating. Now they're in power, and then there's going to be instances like this, what you're dealing with now. They're going to come try to dump money in there. They want to get you out, and the Republicans are nowhere to be found with you. It's kind of like they, we won the election, so we're going to go to sleep now. You can't do that. You can never go to sleep. If you're a CEO of a company, you can never just say, well, my company's worth X amount of dollars. I make X amount of dollars a day. I can go to sleep. No, you can't, because at any moment that could come back around and be halted. So you need to keep working and moving forward. You can't just take a break saying, oh, I'm doing great, because that's when things change for you. And the Republicans happen to do this whenever they're in power, when they have both the House, the Senate, and then the presidency, and then they squander it as usual. It's happening again. But there was one thing I was going to ask you, because you are a mayor, and being a mayor, where you're actually doing a great job of, by the way, unlike New York City. And the reason I'm going to bring up New York City is because very recently, the last couple of days, I have seen what I feel is Trump strong on many issues. Yesterday, he crushed the South African president. And there's things he does that we all love, especially myself, John McCarry, Eric Dim, and Finest Unfiltered, Marlon Bethel. But I see his weakness has been Justice Department. It's always law enforcement. It's his weakness. Why? Way back in a few months ago, with the mayor of New York City, Eric Adams, which if you followed this show or you heard any story about me, I have detailed the criminality involved with him and everyone surrounding him virtually is a first-rate criminal. They don't just commit white-collar frauds. They commit misuse, mismanaged city agencies, all kinds of stuff. And it worked its way to finally he got indicted. If there's anything that Joe Biden Justice Department did right, was that. And it wasn't that he did it. They inherited this. It was passed down from the Trump administration, Eric Adams' case. And it ballooned because, as you know, the federal government takes building blocks. You can't just build a case. You have to build it like a cinder block, and one, build another one, because any holes in any white collar or, straw donor scheme, stuff like that, takes time to develop. So it's not they're targeting someone. They have to let this work because it's very hard to prove things against a sitting mayor, politician. So he had a case. He was indicted, and he was very guilty. I mean, JD, this guy's talking to foreign governments. This guy's taking money from people. This guy has his cronies asking about their crumbs when it came to migrant shelter contracts. He's misused money. He's just completely destroyed the city. Everything Bill de Blasio did, Eric Adams said, hold my jacket, and went on and did everything you could possibly think of to destroy that place. It wasn't Bill de Blasio. He started what Eric Adams is actually finishing. So the Justice Department then emailed both. And this guy came in, Deputy Attorney General, and he was Trump's lawyer. We remember Trump's cases in New York City. Everything is a witch hunt. He's the one guy that could say I was politically targeted. He was. But emailed Bove, who represented him as a defense attorney in his case. Originally, as a criminal defense attorney, Trump had Joe Tacopina, a fellow Paisan, who's probably, if not 1 or 1A, as the best criminal defense attorney in this country. Why? He gets people off. Just look at his last guy, ASAP Rocky, which he did in a liberal jurisdiction in California that's not too fond of, ASAP Rocky and we'll say the hip-hop community. He got him off. So he was in Trump's camp. He was his lawyer. And the case he had was E. Jean Carroll. That whole he touched me too, because that was a whole thing where they made that a case where they brought back a law to go after Trump, right? So then he was the lawyer. And then Boris Epstein, who is Trump's legal counsel, which I don't know why this guy's there. He has no experience anywhere. He's shrouded in mystery. He's been arrested. He's got all negatives on him. Apparently, he was trying to take bribes or something for trying to get people in the cabinet. He somehow has managed to, he's lurking in the corners of Trump world, and he's making a decision of, we're going to get rid of Joe Tacopina, who's a real lawyer, and give you my buddy, Emo Bo, they went to Georgetown or wherever it is together, with Trump's son. So Emo Bove botched the defense, along with Todd Blanche, who's a deputy attorney general as well. That case, everything happened there. He was found guilty. Everything went wrong with them two representing him, whereas when Tacopina was there, he got half that case dismissed, and he left before the case was finished. So you could see this disagreement. So what I'm saying is now, Emo Bove comes, somehow is in the Justice Department with his resume saying very questionable stuff. This guy was prosecuting January 6ers when he was in the Justice Department. He was in the Southern District of New York. So here he comes. He's clearly got an axe to grind. And he says, yeah, that Eric Adams case, we're going to dismiss this, not look at the merits, which are the merits are disgraceful. There's so much stuff to indict him and find him guilty. He gets rid of this case. He's the one, he starts to put the pressure on. 7 line prosecutors resigned. And JD, they're not just liberals. There's Republicans. So we're not going to go on a political spectrum. 7 line prosecutors left. Okay. And here's the case with Mr. Bove pressured top prosecutors in the office to drop the case. He claimed the charges have been brought by an overzealous Biden-appointed U.S. attorney, argued that the case would hinder Mr. Adams' capacity to cooperate with the White House on immigration enforcement. All lies. JD, that's all lies. The case started in 2017, not 2023, whatever he's saying. But the guy he is who he is. Now you're hearing, no, he's going to ask, he wants to be a judge in a circuit court in New Jersey. There's more quid pro quo here going on than anything else I've ever seen. So now one of the things he had said is Eric Adams' case. We can't prosecute him because he's the sitting mayor. He might help us with immigration, which he can't because there's laws that said the police department can't cooperate, which he did an executive order and it got struck down like I said it would. So that's part of it. And then he said this will enable him to correctly run for mayor of New York City because it will affect his campaign. We don't prosecute people while they're running for office. Now, enter Andrew Cuomo, a guy who we don't like. I think we agree politically. I don't like the guy. He's a paisan, but I don't agree with his way of doing things, even though I think we could
He's no good. You know that.
Yeah, we could probably talk to him.
We don't claim him, Sal. We're not going to claim him anymore.
Oh, we're not going to claim, but we would. I think he's a negotiator, meaning he's reasonable where you can at least talk to this guy. If you were someone in the city, he's not like Eric Adams who thinks he knows it all. So Cuomo runs for mayor. Last year, he went to Congress and testified to stuff that when he was the governor, where he could have been prosecuted years ago. Nobody did anything about it. He had to leave office in disgrace as a governor. Nobody prosecuted him, but he came to Congress. He testified. They said he perjured himself. Okay, many people have perjured themselves. Anthony Fauci being one, nothing's being done about that. So only one person has been prosecuted, well, two, and Bannon was. But I remember when Roger Stone, my friend, was, and that was ridiculous. They sent all these people to his house, FBI raid, all that nonsense. But
they did Roger very dirty.
They did him very dirty, and it was very hard to stand by him as that all went down. But Cuomo testified. They say he perjured himself, and they try to put this criminal referral in last year. It didn't work. But now they wait after this guy runs for mayor. Now, you know, JD, they just said that Eric Adams can't be prosecuted because he's running for mayor. Yet here you come and criminally refer his opponent, Andrew Cuomo, which Trump, it seems that they're backing Eric Adams, who unbelievably has destroyed the lives of numerous Trump supporters. Why? When there was an illegal mandate going on in the city that got overturned when they finally went to court and said you had to hire all the municipal employees back, which, JD, they're all Trump supporters. I can tell you the majority, super majority, Trump supporters don't have a job. Cops got fired, one being Marlon Bethel because he refused to bow to this mandate. They don't have a job. They're Trump supporters sitting on the sidelines, real Trump supporters in New York City. And Eric Adams continues to appeal this case. He's called Trump a white supremacist. When Rikers Island was open, right, when they were going to, during Trump's trial, he said, I'm going to personally see to it that, you know, he goes there if the judge rebands him. He is out partying with the likes of Letitia James in a seedy, shady place in the Bronx with a guy who's a mob associate and self-admitted criminal. And now you hear what Letitia James is up to. They're not even scraping the surface because there was human trafficking reported up there and no one did anything about it. He's the mayor, may I add. All of this stuff, I can go over, but they're treating Eric Adams now as, they're using him as a little pawn, like a little Pinocchio, and saying, well, we can use Eric Adams. He'll do our bidding, which he's not. The illegal immigration stuff, you cannot enforce this as a cop. You can't do the civil thing. It's a law, JD. They can't get around it. You have to actually vote. You have to have city council bring this up to change the legislation, which means you need Republicans. I don't know how that's going to happen. So you're in a legal quagmire there. But that's the excuse they use. And the excuse they use for him is, Eric Adams can't be prosecuted because he's running for office, even though he's guilty. They didn't want to admit that. And then Cuomo, we're going to prosecute him, but he is running for office. So how is this not a weaponization of the Justice Department by Trump's DOJ? They're using the excuse of the other politician that rightfully so got locked up in New Jersey, but now it doesn't look good because it looks like you're targeting people. You understand? That's what this is beginning to look like. So what do you have to say for that? Since you're a mayor, you didn't commit any crimes like these guys, but clearly these two, is how are you treating one different than the other, saying, well, Cuomo, he could be prosecuted, even though he lied to Congress, which is, I don't even know what kind of crime that is. It's so laughable.
Mm-hmm.
And this guy did like 10,000 crimes, but we're going to dismiss this case because he's now Trump's best friend or something. Something's going on there.
I understand why you might be asking these questions, Sal, and I think that some of these questions that you're asking are fair questions. I wish that I could tell you what the thought process was of the Justice Department, but I think it could be any number of things. And just trying to think critically here and objectively, I'm trying to think of what is it that you could, use to justify the reasons why Eric Adams is no longer being pursued by the Trump Justice Department. And I think that one thing for sure is clear, and I think that everybody can agree that it's much more clear and definite that Cuomo did in fact lie or perjure himself. And some of the things that are being said about Eric Adams, while I think a lot of people agree that they're true and that they're honest claims, I think that there's still a whole lot of speculation around them. I also wonder too, is it possible that the Trump Justice Department doesn't think that they have enough to stick Eric Adams with? Do they not have cooperating attorneys and judges to go with? I wish I knew a little bit more about the ins and outs of the federal judiciary here. There in New York. And you would be able to speak to it more than I would.
He had seven burner phones, one registered. I'm trying to get I FOIA requested. One of them was an NYPD burner phone. How do you have seven burner phones as the mayor? Which, by the way, he says he can't remember the password. He's dyslexic, yet this guy is running around talking about. He uses the guy. I mean, first of all, he's the real anti-Semite. He was a Louis Farrakhan guy. Now he's trying to butter up to the Jewish community when he let them get beat up for the last 4 years as the mayor. It's ridiculous what this guy has done. But the seven burner phones, they were conducting something there using Signal, which is illegal. They're trying to make Trump's administration look bad. They're using Signal for what? And using a police phone. What is that about? And they're discussing the straw donor schemes because the people they had as witnesses pled guilty. So we already know that there are crimes here. So why is he being let off the hook? But Cuomo, we have to destroy him, but we're not supposed to prosecute anyone while they're in campaign season.
It almost reminds me of, do you remember whenever, Al Capone and the federal government was trying so hard to get to this guy, but they couldn't connect him to anything. And then finally they said, you know what, we're going to get him on this. What was it going to be? Well, let's get him on tax evasion because we can't get him on all the other stuff.
True.
And I wonder, again, is there more going on here than what you and I can see? Are they saying, like, we know that, we're 75% of the way there, but we're really not quite there yet. And so maybe we're not ready to pull the trigger on this because we don't know if it's actually going to stick. And we don't want to accidentally make a martyr out of Eric Adams unless we're 110% sure. Whereas maybe they think, hey, we can burn Andrew Cuomo a lot easier because there are some more concrete facts maybe that we can lean on. And we have some judges that might be a little bit more reasonable in hearing these cases and ruling in the way that we would like to see them. Again, I don't know what the thinking is here. I wish that I had that magic wand to pull the veil back, but I'm confident there has to be some kind of play here. And I don't want to think, and I can't think that President Trump and Attorney General Bondi or any of the Trump DOJ are acting in a way that is not in the best interest of the American taxpayer and constituency. So, but again, we got to have a healthy question of authority all the time. And, I'm hopeful that there's a legitimate reason why these things are going down the way that they are.
Yeah. I just figured I'd ask you that because you're a sitting mayor. You clearly would never do what these guys are doing, but I don't know what the Trump Association is for other than something's going on with Boris Epstein. There was Steve Bannon involved, and Artie Idala was a lawyer. All these guys are Eric Adams cronies. What they're doing in Trump world, I don't know. He's a criminal. He was guilty as sin. In fact, they even said they could have proved this case. They were bringing another indictment on him. I can tell you his current investigations, all roads lead to him with all his NYPD guys. I don't know why not prosecute him. It's mind-boggling. It's not just me saying this. Many in the law enforcement community, especially former retired cops, current cops, all wondering what's going on. I didn't vote for this. I voted for Trump because he was going to bring balance to the force. What are you doing signing up with this clown? That's the problem. That's what people are saying. And now the Cuomo thing is egregious. You got to be fair. You know, we got to be fair and impartial. I can't be a sycophant, you know. That's why I mentioned the MAGA thing is I'm like, Eric Adams.
Just remember this, Sal, and then I'm going to leave you with this. It's important to remember that President Trump is one man. And as we saw during his last time in office, his administration, the swamp, we've heard that so much, right? With the establishment, the people who are they have their claws dug very deep inside of the system, are very deeply entrenched, and it takes time, of course, to weed these folks out. And I do know, because I've heard from people from within the belly of the beast, so to speak, that there is this resist movement where there are actual agents of the federal government who fall under the purview of the executive, or who fall under the purview of a secretary, or in a Trump appointees, who have been given directives to do certain things, but they are deliberately standing in the way of progress on those things. And sometimes it's as simple as just asking more questions and trying to create hurdles where there are none. One example I'll give you is look at what Harmeet Dillon was up against and facing whenever, in the Civil Rights Division, whenever the directors from the president came down and said, hey, listen, anybody who's found to have been discriminating against people based on race or color or creed, particularly in these DEI situations, you are going to go and weed them out and hold these people accountable. They lost 100 lawyers at that division because that directive came down from the president. The ones who stuck around, they were there only to create hurdles for the president. So again, I wonder too, how many people are in the New York area, right, who are working underneath the executive, but aren't fully on board with what it is that President Trump and his administration are trying to complete here, that are creating hurdles or doing things that aren't in line with what is expected, or how many of them are speaking to the press or making decisions without the blessing, of course, of the boss, and how much of that is how much of that is damage control now that we're seeing, where they're going with these things. I wish that I knew, but I'm certain that there are so many things that are happening behind the scenes that you and I are never going to be privy to. And I'm sure that a lot of it has to do with people standing in the way of what it is that President Trump and his administration are trying to complete. So hopefully we can weed these folks out, and we can see, like you said, we can see justice, and we can see a fair interpretation and a fair application of the law moving forward.
That's all I'm asking for. That's why I figure I hit you with that one, only because you're a sitting mayor, and I'm like, how does this look? Here's a mayor who does everything he's supposed to do, and there's one guy who's a criminal, and the other guy who was the governor, who now is trying to be. It's just crazy. New York City is its own monster. It's a world into itself, but it works differently. I just can't believe that Eric Adams' case was dismissed, and now they want to start a case on Cuomo, saying, oh, well, wait, but there's a campaign going on. Funny. But I know now we've been on for 2 hours. I really appreciate that you were on this long with us, and you gave such a great perspective on what happened with Butler County, what's going on, and where you are in Slippery Rock, which runs like a little smooth machine, unlike New York City. So I wanted you, before you leave, where can people find you? Where can they go to your website, to contribute for anything for your campaign? Because we got to get you reelected.
Thank you very much for asking, Sal. Before I talk about those things, I'll just say some of the things I'm most proud about during my tenure as mayor is that I've been able to work with my colleagues and our council to do a couple of really incredible things. First of all, we haven't raised property taxes in 7.5 years since I took office. I refused to sign a tax increase. All of my colleagues understand that. And so we made sure to cut costs on things that were totally ridiculous. I mean, I'm talking about thousands of dollars in contracts just to do things like remove the runner mats, in our office, or for cleaning services, and ridiculous things like that. We have reprioritized spending to make sure that we are focused on constituent services. We increased the size of our police force because it was necessary. We went from covering only about 96 hours a week of police coverage when I took office to now we're almost a complete 24/7 department. And we've been able to do that despite raising taxes ever. We also came into office with over $800,000 of debt. I'm proud to tell you we have under $200,000, and we're on track to make that $0 of public debt held by my community here by the end of the year. And we're doing the right things to encourage businesses to come in. We lowered our fees in the fee resolution for businesses by 25% so they can save money on all manner of fees and permits to make sure that they are well taken care of. And we did some of the culture war stuff too. We made banners for all of our hero veterans in town. We put them up on display for the community on our lampposts. We put up the largest and highest flying American flag in 130 square miles of Slippery Rock, Pennsylvania, and not 1 cent of taxpayer dollars was used to fund that project. That was completely and privately funded. I'm proud to tell you. And so these are just a few of the things that I'm most proud of. But more than anything, it was the resistance that we put to Josh Shapiro and Tom Wolf during the draconian and unconstitutional COVID shutdowns. Whenever they said that we couldn't conduct commerce, we had outdoor festivals to stimulate our local economy, and we did everything we could to make sure that small businesses were able to keep their doors open and keep food on the table for the people who relied on those jobs. And so I'm really proud to have made that stand with my colleagues and with my friends and neighbors in Slippery Rock and across Butler County and the region. So if you support those kinds of things and you'd like to support me, please find me on Facebook, on Instagram, on X, on LinkedIn. You can find me. All my friends call me JD. My mother calls me John David. You can see she blessed me with the name there. There I am with the president. And you can also, if you see it in your heart, to donate to my campaign. I hate to make the ask, but the truth is Democrats are outspending me 10-1 right now almost. And it's just a fact of the situation. So you can find me on Raise the Money and on Win Red. I share those links often for individuals who might like to contribute, and I would greatly appreciate if you would give me your confidence by making a contribution to my campaign so I can continue this work and to continue serving people, Americans like you, in a way that I think that we can all be proud of.
Oh, I'm proud of you. And I think all of Slippery Rock should be proud of the job you've done. You're fiscally conservative, unlike the mayor of New York City, who's a complete disaster and he's in debt like you've never seen. You've actually got that under control. People should use you as a model, but unfortunately, they're too busy out committing crimes and partying all night. So that's pretty much everything in a nutshell. JD, thanks for coming on. You got people in the chat. They loved you. Rob Lukash, Eric Dim was a fellow Marine since Semper Fi, by the way. You know, I wish you luck with your race coming up with your reelection. I'm behind you. So if anything you need from me or Finance Unfiltered, you let us know. You could always come back on. I'm sure there'll be plenty to talk about in the future with Butler County and also with the Trump presidency. Because, look, I did vote for him 3 times. I do like what he's doing. But there is that one thing we discussed that I keep it up because I also believe it could be used as a midterm issue if anyone's running for office and if eventually they regain the House or the Senate. I'm talking about Democrats. So we just got to keep that in mind. So, JD, grazie tanti. And we'll be speaking very soon. I hope you have a good day, a good weekend, and keep fighting out there. And please get reelected because we need people like you in office.
Thank you, sir. Piacere. Alla prossima, my friend.
Grazie.
Thank you. Ciao. Ciao. Thank you, everybody, so much. It was a pleasure to be here with you today.
Great man, JD Longo. I think that was well worth going past 2 hours. I think we need to discuss the Butler County thing. It's like people want to act like, it's forgotten. He was there. He's also fighting for his town where he is a mayor, and he's been mayor for a while. So if you can help him out, do it. This is a politician you need in office, not the garbage you're seeing in New York City, where I laid out the de Blasio, the Brannan, the Brad Lander, this other guy, I think who was this morning? Scott Stringer came on with John. You got Zoran Moldani, Eric Adams, Andrew Cuomo, and then you have a guy that nobody wants to talk about, but he's pretty big, and that's Curtis Sliwa. Because where's the Republicans? Why aren't you backing Curtis, who is the endorsed candidate? But you're backing Eric Adams and Cuomo, 2 people that are, fighting amongst themselves, corrupt, squabbling, and they're on two opposite ledgers of the Trump MAGA movement, or whatever you want to call it. So this is the contrast of things, and I just wanted to point that out. So thanks again, JD, for coming on. So I guess we're winding this down, and I did want to mention, last night's debacle in MSG. The New York Knicks turned back the clock. They went back to the Reggie Miller era. I mean, this was brutal last night, but I expect nothing less from the Knicks. I told you I wasn't a Knicks fan, and there's a reason why. I used to laugh when this kind of stuff happened. Knickerbockers, that was a disgrace last night, man. A game you should have won, now you lost. This is probably going to go 7 games. If they don't win, Stephen A. Smith will probably, drive away from New York, never to be seen again, because he's so invested in this. I heard Sid Rosenberg this morning. We'll see what happens. I tell everybody, proceed with caution. No one in MSG ever wins, apparently, whether it's the Knicks or the Rangers. They never win. 1973, they should be chanting from the rafters. That's the last time the Knicks won. And I don't know what's going to happen with this. You lose again the next game. So much for all of that. The Mets, we keep rolling. We won. We lost 2 games, I believe, to the Red Sox. So we had the win yesterday. So I think they're 30-20 now. Friday night we're playing the Dodgers. That ought to be interesting. So we'll see what happens with that series. So let's go Mets. Let's keep that going. Of course, Inter Milan's playing the final game of the season this weekend. With Napoli's playing their final game. We'll see what happens there. If they win, they lose. I already went over the scenario in the prior episode. Look at this. Win probability. They say the Knicks, when it was 119 to 105, and yet they've somehow lost with a 99.8% chance of winning. Oh, boy. Reggie Miller must have had a good time with that one. Reggie Miller, good guy. Just, that infamous sign is living in infamy. And that's what you need. You need stuff like that to get away from some of the stuff we were discussing that could almost be depressing if you think about it. So sports was always a good outlet. But again, so Inter Milan's playing this weekend. Also, tomorrow, we're going to be the Finest Unfiltered at 8 o'clock, 8:05. I'm probably going to join John and Marlon because you're going to hear a little bit of what I discussed here. You're going to hear about tomorrow, about the whole mayor's race. So tune into that one, 8:05 in the morning. Go back. You can look at watch Executive Perspective. I saw Ron Layson was hosting it because Rob Lukesh couldn't do it this week. So he was on, and his guest was Rob Nappy. Check that out. You can always look that up, Executive Perspective. If you didn't see it, you can watch it on replay. If you want to see them live, every Wednesday, 5:05 Eastern or 17:05 Eastern, live here on X, on the Finest, YouTube, Rumble, LinkedIn, all the channels you can see the Finest Unfiltered. They'll be streaming there as well. So, folks, thank you for tuning in. Hope everyone has a good weekend. I'll see you tomorrow on the Finest Unfiltered, and on Tuesday, I will be back, and I'm going to be discussing something about it's a true crime story. I think you know, if you're old enough to remember, the Son of Sam. So we'll be discussing that on Tuesday. A little revisit on past and current things that happened with that case that are rather interesting. It's always fascinating me because I am a cop still at heart. So tune in for that one on Tuesday. But I'll see you all tomorrow, 8:05 live on the Finest Unfiltered. Go check out Executive Perspective. Check that episode out they just did with Rob Nappy. It was great with Ron. Shout out to Ron and Rob also. I saw them both in the chat. Also, Eric Dim. Hopefully we'll be seeing him soon. Please keep him in your thoughts and prayers with everything that transpired with it and his family, because it's very important. Eric is like a brother to me. So Eric, I miss you and I love you. So I hope to see you back on the airways soon. And with that, I'm going to say, everybody, have a good weekend. Enjoy the Dodgers and the Mets. Let's see what the Knicks do. I'll be back on Tuesday, Sal Greco Show. The Son of Sam will be front and center. So get in the chat because it's going to be very interesting. We're going to show you some evidence and documents and stuff, even newer stuff that nobody knew about. So tune in for that one as well. So I'm signing off from South Florida. All right. Thank you all for being in the chat. Thank you for being here today. And I'll definitely see you on Tuesday. I'm signing off from South Florida, which, again, is a sunny place for shady people.
So this is a biblical moment. You know, when Jesus was on the cross, he said, God, forgive them, for they know not what they do. All these Negroes who are asking me to step down, God, forgive them. Are you stupid?